Welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Synergized. I'm Kevin Smith, your host, and I'm pleased to have joining me today, as we had last week in our leadership conversation, Coach Mark DeHart. And Coach, great job last week. I appreciate you again, my friend, being here. I'm just honored to have someone of your stature to be here and to share your experiences.
Thanks, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here with you again.
Coach, you shared your career a bit last week when we talked as an educator, transition to leadership. And you're someone I look at and I just say, wow, this guy's nothing but success. But there's had to be a few failures in there that stand out to you that molded Mark DeHart maybe more so than any others, in particular as a leader. In that regard, can you talk a bit about an instance and what you took away as a leader that has helped put you where you are today with the life of success, both professionally and personally?
I just think as a young administrator, I had so much to learn. I'm trying to think of a specific situation off the top of my head. There were probably so many. I'm struggling, but I do know the one thing. My superintendent at the time, Don Neal, wanted to work with me and actually took me to a leadership conference. And part of that was just to give me a little more experience and give me some information from other people and how they do things when they make decisions. And I know he felt like I was trying to just make decisions on my own and without concern of what maybe some of those around me, how they would be affected. And lessons well learned early on. And the more decisions that came my way that involved other people and would affect other people, I finally learned I needed to start including them in the decision as well, and try to get their buy-in, their blessings, get their thoughts before anything was done. And when you do that and you give people a chance to speak and share their minds, I think things go so much better that way.
Great advice. And Coach, as you're talking, I'm thinking back, I'm going to show my age here. We used to have these things called cassette tapes or 8-track tapes where you could fast forward or rewind, right? Don't need that
Right.
today in this world. You just punch a button and it's where you want it to be type thing. One of the things as we see educators, administrators also leaving maybe their career earlier than they might have ever imagined, in particular post-COVID, I just sometimes wonder if there isn't so much fast forward occurring. Last week, we talked about the multiple bosses one can have, so to speak, or superiors, and leading to multiple priorities. And I just wonder sometimes if that doesn't create a fast forward in us as human beings to where we get off center with where we know, as Stephen Covey said, the main thing needs to stay the main thing.
Yeah. You get sometimes there's noise out there and you've really got to filter and differentiate between what you think is real, sometimes what may be self-serving for others. It's difficult to do at times, but I think sometimes you just have to shut some of those things out that are not relevant, and you've got to stay your course, and you've got to be guided by, like I mentioned last week, you've got to be guided by the thought of what's best for the kids or what's best for our school situation. Every situation might be different. And because they're doing it in that school, their needs and what they're trying to accomplish may be a little bit different than what your school's is. So sometimes you have to weigh those things. It's okay to hear them, but I still think you have to have a focus with those that are within that know what's best for your kids in your school. And it doesn't mean you're still not going to hit some of that noise out there, but you really have to stay the course, and those that are involved, you have to have their trust that we're doing the right thing.
Coach, as the name of the show, if you will, or at least a part of the mantra still, it's really a model that, as God bless him, because I stayed in his way so much when I was younger, delayed the maturation process without question. But the peace that we have an opportunity to reach, at least I'll share my experience, to reflect back now and all the fog of where confusion was on why things went the way they did is gone. It's very clear to see where they exceeded expectations or where they may have fell short of what in the natural was expected. But the consistency that I have found, to use that word again that we talked about last week a great deal, is every time expectations were exceeded, it was because of one reason. And it was just still. It was just being able to not allow the fast forward to take you and turn things into a whirlwind. And I use the acronym or the acrostic for still as simply serve, and not just serve others, but serve self, not in a selfish way. But we can't raise the value we bring to someone else until we raise our own value we have within. And I think that's something educators sacrifice a lot of in that regard. In those that can really balance, you talked a bit about going to a leadership conference or the superintendent giving the opportunity. It's so important that educators and leaders in all walks of industry take that moment, clear their mind to be able to focus on their own growth. Share a bit about how you've been able to succeed throughout your career in that area.
I always encourage our coaches to be members of their coaches associations. And being on those coaches associations, they would go to their clinics or they would have meetings. And during those times, you really get an opportunity to talk to other folks around the state, outside of your own area, and that fellowship you can have with, and there may be guest speakers and things lined up, and you can listen to those things, but just the networking you get with those other folks and getting away from your own situation and clearing your mind and hearing some of the things they have to say and sharing ideas with them. All associations are like that. Assistant principals associations, athletic director associations. It is really, I think it serves everyone well to get involved in those types of things, just so that you can share your own issues, hear other people's issues, resolutions to those. It helps the person grow professionally in a tremendous way. And I've always felt like those things have served me well. And in turn, if it's helping me, it's going to be helping other people around me because I feel like I'm going to be doing my job better.
Coach, as you were talking again, something hit my mind that it really is an opportunity that sometimes we overlook in life. And again, whether it's education as a manufacturer or service provider, medical industry, government, just those opportunities to have conversations and learn. Many times I'm not sure we really enter a conversation with that as a possibility in that regard. But just like you and I, these past two weeks, last week and today, it's an opportunity for me to learn, and I'm learning as you speak, and it's creating opportunities for me to reflect moving forward. They exist in every conversation we have, even those conversations we might consider to be somewhat uneasy, perhaps with an angry parent or in disciplining a student or an employee, or having to say, you know what, your performance isn't where it needs to be, and here's what we think needs to happen in that setting. How do you feel leaders get over that initial aspect when it's maybe a new role for them? How did you, when you had to bring in a student athlete as an administrator, as a coach for the first time or two, how did you work through that aspect to where intimidation or the fact is that's not really what I'm here to do and I'm not going to do that type thing? Because I kind of term it this way, and I read this a couple of years ago. Alan Mulally used to lead as the Ford Motor Company CEO. Instead of tough love, it was loving tough in that setting. And I can remember people when I was younger, and hey, I was never an athlete. People saw me come and they hit the balls and bats and things like that, so there wouldn't be any broken windows in that setting. But really, it was consistently coaches and educators would say, you need to be mad and concerned when people aren't coming to you to give you what you need to hear.
Situations like that are never easy. When the parents don't agree that their son or their daughter did anything wrong. Luckily, for a lot of the things that you have to deal with, we had developed a code of conduct, which our school board approved, and we had parents involved in the creation of that. And so we had a little bit of something black and white that we could lean on. Doesn't necessarily mean that there were situations where gray entered into it. And when that happened, then we had to involve people that if it involved an athlete of the coach, we would bring the coach in and say, hey, listen, this is what we've got. Talk it through, bring in the superintendent and the principal and make sure they were on board, and then work together to resolve the situation and move forward from there. And all of that, again, just to try to protect the integrity of that student and for the teams and school that they were representing. And with those thoughts in mind, it made a difficult situation tolerable. It's never easy to discipline kids, but knowing in the end that if you don't, there's going to be other There's going to be other questions and that you're going to have to answer after that. I had an administrator, when you think too much with this and not with this, it's going to bite you down here. You always had to keep that in mind when you were dealing with those situations. And when they were resolved and they were taken care of, you didn't want to fight any backlash after that.
Yeah, to your point, all schools have the code of conduct, behavior, and the handbooks, and businesses do as well in that regard.
Sure.
I always looked at it in many ways that I didn't choose to violate the behavior in that piece. So it's a teaching opportunity as much as you want it to be teaching opportunity. Sometimes it really depends on what the individual, he or she or the parents, take out of that. Coach, shifting gears a little bit, last week you talked about the impact of your father and your grandfather and your family on your career. When you think back on the leadership component itself of who Mark DeHart is, who really helped you pave that path even farther along than what you might have ever imagined?
I would have to lean on all of the administrators that I've had. Once I started teaching, I probably worked for maybe 5 different high school principals, 5 or 6 different superintendents. And I can't say there's a one of those guys that I did not admire and respect and take things from, even though their leadership were all different, probably because they're all different personalities and they had their own ways of working through situations and the way they did their jobs. But I think I took something from every one of those guys and gals and took the pieces that kind of fit my personality and used those to the best of my ability. And the ones I wasn't real comfortable using, then I left those to the side. But and then that kind of formed my own leadership style, which I'm sure is different from anybody else's. I just have a tremendous amount of respect for all of those and the mentoring they did when I was as a teacher, coach, and administrator. Just learned so much from so many. It's difficult for me to pinpoint and say this one guy was the whole key behind it. There were a lot of people that helped and worked miracles with me just to even get me to be average.
I don't believe that for a minute. You were a budding star when that occurred, I'm sure. But I love what you just said because it really goes about not only body of work, but body of opportunity. Back again to the learning piece. And I sometimes question, does our society respect body of work today as it once did, or at least appeared to in that regard? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I guess it depends on who you ask, but there's a lot of sources out there that would tell you no. I think there's still a lot of respect for body of work, and at least I hope so because I'm a firm believer.
Oh, I concur. And Coach, one other thing that jumps out in the eye in the still model of leadership our viewers see on the screen really is about influence and inspiring. And as generations change, so does what allows that influence and inspiration to really hit home. And one of the things when I coach executive, middle managers, middle leaders, supervisors, probably more common question from those groupings than anything is this: how can I influence and yet do it and be honest to myself, be who I am, use my strengths when I've got all these other reports and people expecting me to do things their way? Is that something you've experienced in your career? Would you mind talking about that and sharing some things there?
Yeah, I think so. There are so many different governing bodies involved with athletics and with school systems, and there's so many boxes that you have to check. Sometimes you feel like you're inundated with trying to support that you're doing a good job rather than being able to
Mm,
focus on doing a good job.
mm.
I know that can be such a burden, but yet it's necessary to do that. I just never felt comfortable to the side or giving that to somebody and say, just fill this out. I don't care what it looks like. You wanted to do the job right. And I guess that's part of it. And that's one of the tasks of that position that you still have to take care of and you have to do to complete the task the way it needs to be done. But again, it just makes that time that you have left even more important to be really efficient and to do things the right way. You might be stressed on time to get it done the right way.
Thank you for sharing, Coach. Coach, as we begin to put a wrap on our time together these past 2 weeks, and again, thank you so much. And from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate the person you are, the leader you've been, and the child of God that you are, and the friend that you are, and just for taking time to be here and the words of wisdom. What one piece of advice for someone just beginning to consider, okay, I've done this, whether it's lead the manufacturing line on the plant floor, whether it's coach junior high basketball, varsity basketball, and they're saying, I think now's the time to take the next step in leadership. What's something through your experience, either going through the decision process or transition or determining now's the time, that you could share?
I think deep down, you should know whether you feel like that
Mm.
is a step that you're ready to take. And when you take it, you've got to expect a learning curve. You can't get too discouraged. You need to have a nice support team around you who's willing to help you when those difficult things come along. And you can't be afraid to lean on those folks. In time, I think, if you feel like it's something, you can do it. But you can't fear failure and not give yourself a chance to do it. And you will learn a lot about yourself, whether you're successful or not. And I think in the end that you can rest easy knowing that, hey, I gave it my best shot. And if it didn't work out, it wasn't meant to be. Maybe a few years will pass, a different opportunity will open up, and you'll be able to lean on some of those experiences you had with that first opportunity, and it will only help you the next down the road.
Said, my friend. What's next for you, Coach DeHart, whether it's in growth or a challenge or the next thing outside your comfort zone that you want to dive into?
Kevin, since I've gotten out of education and I'm in this new working world, the business world with the Fleet Company and selling athletic equipment furniture, it is a little bit of a step down from the intensity level what I was working. I almost feel semi-retired, not quite there, because I still have a lot of challenges that I'd like to meet and goals that I want to meet professionally. But overall, right now, I just spend time, I think, and reflect on making sure that I'm being the best me that I can be as a family man, as a professional still working with people that I know and have relationships with. And I just hope that I'm being the person that God would want me to be in my relationships with other people. Show them love, show that I care about them, listen to them, and just I want to feel good about myself and that I'm still living a good life and doing what I can to still accomplish things with my family and, like I said, with my profession.
I know without a doubt that God's looking down and seeing you as a class act and a model for the rest of us. And I appreciate that. And Coach, with that said, if someone watching or listening today or in the future wants to reach out, how can they contact Coach DeHart?
I'm not a super social media nut or anything, but I do have a Facebook page and an Instagram and LinkedIn. So all they'd have to do is search and send me a message, and I'd be happy to get in touch with them.
Oh, that's fantastic. It took me a while to find you on Facebook. There's a lot of Mark DeHarts around the world. You might not think that going into it, but it took me a while. Is this the right one? That's perfect. Coach, again, I appreciate you, my friend. You're just a great professional and leader. And wow, what a life and career you've had. And I know God's blessed you, but he's blessed all of us that's had the opportunity to be able to come across your path in life. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, sir.
Kevin, I am absolutely humbled that you have asked me to join you on your program. I hope somebody out there gets something from my rambling, but if not, I've enjoyed talking to you for these past 2 weeks.
It's been a great conversation, and I know without a doubt the ramblings are hitting home in multiple ways. It certainly did with me, and I'm sure our viewers and listeners can attest to that. For Coach Mark DeHart, I'm Kevin Smith. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. We hope and pray that your leadership development continues forward. God bless you. Have a great day.